You may start, Vaishali, and then give him the floor afterwards.
Oh, great. I think it's right at 2:45, so I think it's perfectly all right. And Dr. Gambo is the last speaker, so I hope he joins us by the time his turn comes. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, and wherever you're calling from. I'm in India, and it's 12:15 midnight. To begin today's session, workforce housing is defined as housing affordable to households earning between 60 to 120% of area income. Workforce housing targets middle income workers, which include professionals such as police officers, firefighters, teachers, healthcare workers, retail clerks, and the like. A significant first step a town and small city can take to encourage workforce housing development is to start the conversation within the community and help raise awareness. Often it is associated with municipal finance. With that in mind, today we have 5 esteemed professionals with various backgrounds focusing on workforce housing and affordability, who will share their experience and insight into this topic. The speaking order has already been set. You are given 5 minutes, but I think we have plenty of time, so please feel free. I will time you once you reach your 5 minutes. I'll send you a private message, and then you can just take 1 minute or so to wrap up. Our first speaker is Charlie Ligeti. Mr. Ligeti is a published author, serial entrepreneur, former licensed real estate agent, and commercial real estate banker. Charlie is the director of the Housing Innovation Collaborative based in Los Angeles, California. His recent work on rapid shelter solutions has been featured in national press and published with the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. Charlie earned his MBA from University of Southern California. Charlie, the floor is yours.
All right, great. Well, thank you for the introduction, Vaishali, and I guess good morning or good evening to everyone kind of spread out all over the place. So I'm just gonna share my screen here to kind of go over some of our work. Is it possible to give me screen sharing capability?
Could you please try?
Okay, yeah, it still says disabled.
Please try now.
All right, let me see. Oh, perfect. Okay. All right. Well, great. Yeah. I mean, so I just kind of give a quick background. So I'm the director of a nonprofit educational platform based here in Los Angeles, but really we kind of manage a lot of content and bring a lot of people together from around the world, just given that we are a website. But the Housing Innovation Collaborative is a nonprofit based here in Los Angeles. We manage and curate this website, housinginnovation.co. So it's the first thing that comes up if you Google housing innovation. Really, it's kind of a research and development platform. So the research is presented through kind of this immersive media experience, which I'll kind of go through real quick. But one of the 4 pillars that we focus on, aside from rapid shelter, emergency shelter, backyard homes, ADUs, the sort of these kind of emerging fields in the housing development industry that can provide, promising new ways to rapidly scale and accelerate housing development, especially for the underserved communities. But I'll be kind of diving into the 3rd pillar here, the Essential Housing Campaign, and sort of how it fits in within the context of our work. But yeah, so we kind of look at this continuum of a lack of supply of housing out there, really kind of along that whole everything from temporary permanent housing all the way up through, temporary transitional housing all the way up through permanent infill developments. And so that essential housing campaign's pillar number 3. And then that 4th pillar is a directory of every housing factory in the world. But kind of just give some context here. We kind of act as a cataloger, showcaser of a lot of innovation in spaces that are really kind of living in the dark ages in the housing development ecosystem. And our website reaches about 1 million views a year, about 250,000 people view this content and use it as sort of a database or an educational experience. But the first one is every rapid shelter in the world. So it's sort of a sortable database of rapidly deployable shelter that local governments have been using now for a couple of years just to find ways to deploy housing in a time of crisis or emergency. Whether that's homelessness or refugee crisis or town up the hill from us in California here burning down, which is pretty much guaranteed every year. We lose about 20,000 homes a year just to forest fires in California. What do we do in the interim to pop up shelter really quickly? So this is sort of a Facebook of lots of different solutions out there, both deployed and some conceptual designs out there too that have just been submitted to us that kind of are pushing the envelope in that design realm. And then on the kind of other end of this, research and development, we're obviously also interested in how the development works. So we've been showcasing how cities are using rapid shelter to deploy in a bunch of different contexts, whether it's church-owned land or under a freeway, sort of getting creative with the site selection, the source of funding, the development team, and just showing kind of the who, what, when, where, why of how rapid shelter is being deployed in communities. So, this is kind of like one of our first pillars that's kind of focused on that sort of lowest barrier to entry to housing. And we have backyard homes, which I can talk about for hours, but sort of this emergence of adding density, infill density, which could be a way for single-family homeowners to provide, sort of that workforce housing, unsubsidized, undeed restricted type of informal housing market. But at the end of the day, kind of focusing on the missing middle here of the middle class income housing. The essential housing campaign is kind of the main focus of that movement, which really highlights a series of projects around the world. So we kind of showcase, both 4-story infill projects and also just master plan districts that are providing unsubsidized middle-income housing to their residents. And this is sort of a way to kind of show case studies of how a series of policy, financing, and design build solutions are kind of interwoven and coming together to kind of solve this problem of housing development at scale. So, I can talk for hours about all the different, policymakers, city council members, developers, financiers, manufacturers that we've showcased here, just kind of providing 10-minute overviews of sort of what's the latest and promising, ways around 3D printing or local policy solutions out there. And then lastly, the Housing Factory World Tour, again, kind of in solving these information gaps out there. When we look at sort of just the sheer amount of housing that needs to be produced, and whether it's Los Angeles or whatever else, what other city that is kind of lacking housing, it's usually in the hundreds of thousands of units, which really, I think, calls for taking factory production more seriously. And that's just not just like volumetric modular units that you see being craned into a site, but even just prefab walls, prefab bathroom units, kind of just looking at this whole space of housing development, of just really kind of, accelerating and exchanging knowledge around how to just quickly build housing using our manufacturing base, I think is really crucial to driving down the cost of housing. But yeah, circling back, I guess my last 30 seconds here on the Essential Housing Campaign. So we've actually been trying to underwrite a middle-income housing project, 48 units here in Los Angeles, that would be exclusively leased to that 60 to 120% AMI really to kind of see what are the missing gaps in the policy you need, in the financing you need, and in the design that you need to actually make it pencil. Because at the end of the day, sort of my banker hat is always thinking about, well, this project needs a pencil to be reality. You can't just be fancy architecture or a bunch of fancy policy. It really needs to have that, return on total cost. So we've been challenged by that. I guess I can talk about that more, but I mean, there's definitely another couple of years of work, both in creating the policy pathways and sort of creating the financial sort of incentives, whether it's property tax abatements or density bonuses that will allow this to be feasible. But as of now, I mean, I think the status quo of not building middle income housing and that sort of bandwidth will continue until some major policy and financial reforms are made. So that's, I'll stop sharing my screen now since I know I have to pass the mic quickly.
Thank you. I was looking forward to your presentation because you are going to present your website. So thank you for that, Charlie. Our second speaker is Jennifer Beasley. Ms. Beasley is an executive director at the Blue Mountain Attainable Housing Corporation, Canada. She has more than 20 years of senior experience driving social, economic, and built environment interventions in the nonprofit and public sectors. With a transdisciplinary approach rooted in principles of equity, inclusion, and sustainability, Ms. Beasley holds a MSc degree from University of Guelph, Ontario, Canada. I hope I pronounced that right. Ms. Beasley, the floor is yours.
You're unmuted now. Please go ahead.
Yeah, no, I had the sign flashing mute and unmute. So, okay. And I guess, shall I share my presentation or I sent it in? Will you share it? I will share it.
Ozan will give you the right to share.
Okay, here we go. Just a moment. There we go. Okay. So thank you for that introduction and hello everyone. So as mentioned in the introduction, I am the executive director of the Blue Mountains Attainable Housing Corporation, and I'm going to be speaking to a municipal approach to workforce housing. A little bit about us. We are a municipal nonprofit corporation that was created by the town of the Blue Mountains in Ontario, Canada, not to be confused with the Blue Mountains in Australia, to support local workforce and economic development. Now, for context, the Blue Mountains was Canada's second fastest growing municipality in the last census, with an increase in population of 33.7% over the 5-year period ending 2021. We're home to over 9,300 full-time residents and an extensive part-time and seasonal population. Now, with that level of growth, we do not appear to have a problem building housing. Instead, we have a problem building the right kind of housing. Only 59% of private dwellings are occupied by permanent usual residents, of which only 13% were of rental tenure. And with very few homes available for purchase for less than $1 million. We have a critical shortage of long-term rental and entry-level ownership housing, particularly for the workforce. And our role is to act as an advocate, catalyst, and provider of attainable housing with a mandate to increase housing options to help people live and retire in the community where they work. Now, for our approach in our early years, our focus was on ownership and providing financial assistance to first-time homebuyers and for the creation of secondary suites or ADUs. In recent years, with an interest in having a greater impact in filling market gaps, our focus is now on both rental and ownership housing options for the workforce housing, moderate income individuals and households whose needs are not being met by the private market. We're still in the early stages of developing projects and programs, but we did look to practices in communities with similar challenges, including Whistler, Banff, and Canmore, The latter community, which I led their housing corporation for 7 years previously. And that work informs our work here today. Now, our model does require that each project be financially sustainable. This requires significant upfront investments, including land, grants, financing, development charge exemptions, and other contributions from all levels of government and other partners. Now, our model also requires affordability to be locked in over time through rental and resale terms and conditions, so that the investment remains in the community for the benefit of current and future residents. Now, a key benefit of creating a municipal nonprofit corporation for a municipality is that it can be a tool or instrument to achieve local housing goals and strategies, particularly where there are few nonprofit or for-profit developers working in that space. We can act as a developer, partner, and an advisor to the municipality, to developers, and to employers, and facilitate and leverage additional investment in local housing infrastructure. Now, one focus area that we are working on is partnering with developers who are interested in giving back to the community and investing in attainable housing. We currently have an MOU with a developer who is offered to provide approximately 25% of the units in one development as attainable housing. And so we'll work with them through different delivery options, including rental, ownership, and a rent-to-own option. And we may acquire an interest through the lease or purchase of the units, or we might just continue to assist them with program administration services. Now, an entrepreneurial mindset is necessary in this environment to identify and seize opportunities. But along with that, you need a clear framework to provide certainty in terms of guidelines and a standardized approach to determining prices and rents. Now, our other focus area is development of our first purpose-built rental property called the Gateway Project, currently in the pre-construction phase. And so the prior speaker was talking about taking a pencil to it. It's very difficult to make these projects happen. This is just a quick overview of kind of how our funding is structured for this project. It is a mixed use and mixed income property with approximately 84 rental units with at least 50% to be provided to the local workforce at below and near market rents. As you likely know, a funding strategy is a puzzle of grants, contributions, and loans, all with different terms and requirements. Now, our current funding strategy has a local government contribution from the town and county, representing about 14% of the total project costs. Another 1% are pre-development grants provided by CMHC and FCM, I think 2 organizations we're going to hear from shortly. And as well, our legal status as a nonprofit organization that provides municipal services also qualifies us for a higher sales tax rebate than a charity or other nonprofit organization. And while we're originally expecting more contributions through CMHC programs or provincial government funding, that now appears unlikely. One of the challenges with these programs is the focus on more vulnerable populations and not the workforce housing population. So instead, we have construction and takeout financing anticipated through one of the CMHC programs or a private funding source. So my last slide is just some of the challenges that we're facing, and I look forward to hearing any suggestions or having some discussion on addressing them. But I'd like to highlight 3 of the challenges and some of the actions that we're currently taking to address them. So the first one, as I already alluded to, complex funding structures and requirements and a lack of programs specific to workforce housing. So to address this challenge, we're now reaching out to intermediaries to access private funds from insurance companies and pension funds. We're also casting our net wider for government funding and reframing our requests, not only seeking funding from ministries responsible for housing, but also from ministries responsible for labor. The second challenge, the limited tools that a municipality may have to require or incentivize developers and employers to invest in workforce housing. I know Corey DiMano, the mayor of Banff, referenced their program. They have special legislation that allows them to do that as a resort municipality. Whistler also is a resort municipality. Those tools aren't necessarily available to everyone. And working in Canmore, we didn't have those tools. So you have to be very mindful of the tools available in your jurisdiction. And so what we're exploring here, and it started with just an idea from the mayor of the Blue Mountains, we're exploring a potential attainable housing credit program. We're kind of trying to sell that to the province, which would extend existing inclusionary zoning provisions that are currently in the Planning Act, but they currently have limited use in low density communities like smaller urban centers. And so we are proposing a market-based system that could encourage more attainable housing and provide more funding in smaller urban rural areas. Another option would be to establish a reserve fund specifically for this form of housing. I applaud Collingwood for setting up setting aside funds for housing in their last budget, I believe. Canmore also had a dedicated fund, but what we do find, we come against challenges with local taxpayers being resistant to their money being, their taxes being used for the benefit of the workforce and employers. And then finally, the local focus. We do have a local focus, but we recognize we're part of a larger economic region, the Southern Georgian Bay, which includes our neighbor Collingwood. And so we are looking for regional partnerships and options to achieve scale and financial sustainability, although municipal boundaries and our legal structure can be a barrier to this. So I look forward to questions and discussing some of our challenges and hearing your ideas.
Thank you, Ms. Beasley. I will come back to you for giving back to community. Let's hear more about that. Our next third speaker is Jen Arntfield. Ms. Arntfield is the lead of sustainable affordable housing at the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. She led the design of the sustainable affordable housing funding offer and is currently focusing on programs on improving operations and effectiveness. Prior to joining FCM, Jen led the development of the City of Calgary's affordable housing strategy and 10 years plan. Jen holds an MBA degree from Carleton University in Ontario, Ottawa. Jen, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And I think my slides are going to be shared for me.
Sure, we can do that.
Okay, thank you so much. Great. Okay, well, thank you so much for having me. Just want to quickly acknowledge I'm joining you from Ottawa, Ontario today, which is on the unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation. So as was mentioned, I'm the lead of sustainable affordable housing, which is a $300 million funding offer of FCM's Green Municipal Fund that was designed to enable, support, and incentivize energy efficiency in affordable housing. So next slide, please. Just want to start with a little bit of context as to why energy efficiency in affordable housing, particularly recognizing that within this sector there are so many competing priorities. But just as a starting point, a significant percentage of Canada's carbon emissions come from buildings. So to meet Canada's climate goals, that needs to be addressed. And affordable housing in particular is a really good opportunity because 3/4 of the stock across the country is over 30 years old. So many of these older buildings will have been built with single pane windows or inefficient boilers, leaking envelopes. So they actually cost a lot to maintain. There's a lot of opportunity in terms of actual cost savings in operations to be found in energy efficient buildings and or in new builds, just having much lower costs to operate. I was able to join the last few minutes of the last session, and there was a conversation about affordability in the context of not just kind of rent or mortgage, but also considering transportation. Another thing that's typically not kind of included in the definition of core housing need or affordability is utility costs. And energy poverty is actually surprisingly prevalent in the affordable housing sector. About 17% of people who are living in kind of non-market social community housing are actually in energy poverty. So they're paying more than 6% of their after-tax income on utilities, on their heating and electricity bills. And then in addition to all of those great reasons, if we're talking about the challenges of a changing climate, there's a lot of opportunity to build buildings with additional resilience or provide affordable cooling options, which is actually just becoming more and more of a requirement from a health perspective. So lots of reasons. Next slide, please. But at the end of the day, we do kind of recognize what this comes down to is the capital costs, and that's actually where our program comes in. So this is just an overview of our sustainable affordable housing funding offer. It was really designed in the context of the other funding and opportunities out there, again, to kind of provide that additional funding required to build to that higher standard. I'm not going to go through all of the details there. I will put a link to our website in the chat so you can check them out, but I'll highlight a couple of things. We intentionally offered funding at every stage of a project from its very earliest inception with our planning grants, which offers a simple and fast application process. And it's intended to really just help get an energy efficient project off the ground, to studies, which is where you can do kind of the more detailed planning, pre-construction, do your energy modeling work kind of thing. And then to construction, obviously, which is supported by our capital project financing. We've taken a bit of a different approach for retrofits and new builds. For retrofits, our funding is intended to support providers in striving for deeper energy savings. So it's a combination of grant and loan, and the grant portion is actually tied to the anticipated energy savings in a project, starting at 25% and up to 50%. So if a project anticipates a 25% reduction in energy use, it will receive a 25% grant, 30% energy savings, 30% grant, so on up to 50%. For new builds, our funding covers the incremental costs associated with a very ambitious net zero energy ready project. Our capital financing will cover up to 20% of the project costs, of which 50% is a grant. Now, research shows that it typically costs about 10% to build to this higher standard. So effectively, we're providing a grant to let you do so. Next slide, please. So just wanted to actually show a great example of a workforce housing project that we've supported. And I think this is a great kind of compliment to Jennifer, the last speaker there, in terms of another way that a municipality has kind of been innovative and to bring this kind of housing into their community. I really love this example for this partnership between the municipality of Roslyn in British Columbia and the Lower Columbia Affordable Housing Society, which is a nonprofit in that community. Roslyn is a small community of just over 4,000 people in the Kootenays Rockies region of central BC. It's just a few kilometers north of the US border. So the municipality and the nonprofit partnered to construct a 37-unit building to address a lack of workforce housing for moderate income working individuals and families. So the project is targeting net zero energy ready to support the city's net zero by 2050 ambitions. The first floor is going to house Roslyn City Hall, and then there'll be 3 floors of affordable housing above it. And so the building's going to include energy efficient measures like efficient mechanical and electrical systems, a highly insulated building envelope, high efficiency windows, and LED lighting. So with support from the Sustainable Affordable Housing funding, the project was actually able to improve their environmental outcomes and then also increase the affordability of their units. So next slide, last slide here. Just wanted to note that in addition to funding these ambitious projects, another kind of key component of the sustainable affordable housing mandate is to build up the affordable housing sector's capacity and energy efficiency. We do this a number of ways. We have a bunch of tools and resources on our website. I just want to highlight a few things here because we have a couple of new resources that I'm really excited about. We have a new energy efficiency guide for affordable housing providers, which actually walks you through all sorts of opportunities for energy savings and helps you start a project. And a new building operators training, which is a free online course, again, it's a kind of broadly on the maintenance of a building and also with an energy efficient lens to it. I'll also note through our regional energy coach program, we've partnered with the Community Housing Transformation Center, BC Nonprofit Housing Association, and the Cooperative Housing Federation of Canada to provide free coaching services to actually help get a project off the ground as well. So all of these tools and resources are available online. So I will put a link to our website in the chat. Thank you so much.
Sorry, you're mute, by Shelley. Could you unmute yourself, please?
Thank you, Ozan. Thank you, Jen. Our fourth speaker is Jamie Shipley. Jamie is a consultant at Canada Mortgage Housing Corporation. He is currently focusing on knowledge transfer and outreach programs. Jamie has 30 years of experience in the residential construction industry, including over 25 years with CMHC. Jamie's role at CMHC includes promoting the creation of sustainable affordable housing and delivering on the National Housing Strategy. Jamie is a member of the Ontario Association of Certified Engineering Technicians and Technologies. He holds a degree from Fanshawe College of London, Ontario. Jamie, you have the floor.
Thank you. Oh yeah, okay, there's my presentation, okay. Thanks for the opportunity. I'd like to take this moment to talk to you about what CMHC is offering proponents that are interested in contributing to the affordable housing, I'll call it a crisis in this country. So there's several things that I'm going to highlight today. Some are old, been around for a while, and other have some new announcements as well, as this landscape is constantly changing. Next slide, please. I'd like to start by just explaining when we took a look at the National Housing Strategy and we had our vision for what we call inclusive housing. We took a look at what I call the three pillars, which are the people, the communities, and the partnerships. And the reason I'm highlighting this is it helps you understand when we talk about the programs that we offer and the criteria that we're focused on and the way we prioritize. Like I guess I should tell you up front that most of the national housing programs, most of them are national competitions. So even though you may check all the boxes of the criteria, you are competing against other projects in the country, and we fund the best, the ones that score the highest. So it is a competition. And in order to leverage as much as we can, we're really looking for some key partnerships. So the partnerships can be private and public and private partnerships, all levels of government. In fact, for most of our programs, in order to be accepted, there must be another level of government that is supporting your project. In a lot of cases, that is the municipality. When we look at the people, it's understanding who we're trying to house, how the best way to house them, understanding their needs, and understanding that the project and the location of the project is going to be beneficial for the people that live there. A little bit about that in the next slide. And then, of course, the communities, we're really looking to build communities. In this next slide, we point out that the vision for social inclusion. So you'll notice that, that we say that individuals having resources and opportunities to be involved in their communities in the way that they want to. So if you look at, the affordability is obviously key, but location is important. We talked, so this was mentioned earlier today in the panel, distance to work, distance to amenities. So location of the project is also very important, especially distance to transit without use of vehicles and all that lovely stuff. Next slide, please. These are the programs that we have available, and I'm showing the housing continuum there from homelessness to market housing, and we have programs for all segments of the market up to the MLI Select is a new announcement. Rental construction finance is another program at the top end. Our mortgage loan insurance for market housing, all the way down to the co-investment fund, which does fund more of the vulnerable population. We have seed funding that is all stackable with the other programs to help development get to the development stage, funding some of the soft costs, the consulting and the studies, and the other soft costs that are required to get to shovel ready. And then of course the innovation fund, which was around for a while, it's back now, it's been refunded, and we're looking for more innovation in the industry when it comes to creating or financing affordable housing. Next slide, please. I highlight the social outcomes. These are prevalent to all of our programs. We're always looking for the projects to be financially viable. There is the affordability measurement always changes depending what program you're looking at. It can range from 20% at a 30% median household income. That's the rental construction finance threshold. And then when you get to a deeper affordability on the co-investment, we're looking for 30% of the units to be at 80% or lower of the median market rent. Then we have the energy efficiency requirements is another outcome. We're looking for anywhere between 15 and 25% more energy efficient than the 2015 model National Energy Model Code. That depends on what program you're looking at. Accessibility and universal design is pretty much the same for all our programs. We're either looking for 20% of the units to be accessible or the entire building to be universally designed, which is a very popular concept that we're seeing more and more of. A universal design just means your unit will be marketable to all Canadians of all ages and all abilities. And we do have a new guide that we're just publishing for anyone interested in understanding universal design better. The affordability commitment, like I said, these are minimum requirements, but like I said, you're being scored in priorities, and the longer you go affordable and the deeper affordability, the more priority points you'd score and the better chance of being selected. Next slide, please. Just as I follow up on that, and before I get to the housing supply challenge, the benefits of our programs would be lower interest rates, longer amortization up to 50 years, higher loan to cost ratio, so meaning less equity required, and of course locking in interest rates for long terms. You can lock in for a 10-year term and then renewable for another 10-year term. A very low loan to debt ratio, basically 1 to 1 and 1.1. So it just allows more debt on the project, which frees up more capital for other projects. Another area that is not a financial program, but it's the housing supply challenge. And in our battle to try to combat affordable housing, we know that one of the biggest problems is we're not bringing on enough supply. So the challenge has been going on now for almost a couple of years. It's a 5-year challenge. We're I think 2 to 3 years into it. We're at round 4 now. There's 7 rounds total. And what we do each time is focus on a different area. This round is focusing on innovative construction for housing affordability funds. We're just basically looking for solutions to gaps or barriers that are out there. And if you have those solutions, you would submit your solution to the problem you're trying to solve. If selected, you would go to the next round where you would incubate that solution, maybe prototype it, And then once that's done, if selected for the third round would be paying the cost to implement your solution into the industry. So with this challenge, the idea is to help bring on more supply, put an end to the barriers and the gaps that are out there. And by listening to the industry tell us what the problems are and sourcing out the solutions and then funding those solutions as we see fit. Next, please. Next slide, please. And then finally, upcoming initiatives to keep an eye out for. We're just piloting. It's just been announced. Might not be official yet, but we were told about it last week. Capital Connect. What this is basically a digital hub that we are creating to connect projects to private capital. So people that may want to invest in social projects, investments, to connect to projects. And this is a hub that we're working on. It's in a pilot stage right now. We expect it to grow and then eventually pass it off. It's not something that CMHC is looking to manage, but once we can get it up and running, it could be a useful tool for finding investors connecting to projects that need private capital. And then last, the Housing Accelerator Fund will be announced probably within the next 30 days, and it is focused on municipalities. It is a lot of money, $4 billion over 5 years, to assist with the municipalities to tackle the affordability, getting their supply online. Like, we know that there's a lot of delays at municipal approvals, so cutting through the red tape that you've probably heard. It might require some funding, maybe hiring additional staff to do some pre-zoning, whatever the issues are in the municipalities. It's supporting that, funding that, so that we can get a better landscape of getting through the process of getting your projects approved at the municipal level. So watch for the Accelerator Fund. And then that's it. My last slide is just my information to contact me. Next slide, please. That's my email address, is the best way to contact me if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. Do we have has Dr. Gambo joined us? Now we will go ahead.
He's not here, unfortunately.
Yeah, I saw him log in multiple times and accepted, but for some reason he kept dropping off. But we've had 4 brilliant presentations, and I cannot wait to move into the Q&A session. I will watch the chat as well, as I have a few questions prepared to ask. And these are pretty much based on the conversation that is taking place nowadays with the post-COVID recovery acts by various, pretty much all government around the world. So my question 1, and it's we will go into to answer the question, we'll go into the same order as we spoke. Some advocates have conflated affordable and workforce housing that is combining homelessness, low income, and middle class needs together. Does such an approach sufficiently address the complexity of the debate, or are towns and cities more successful when they address these issues separately? So I would say, Charlie, you go first, and then we'll follow.
Just to be clear, it's whether municipalities find the strategy of separating homelessness and middle income housing versus combining them when they're talking to their constituents about housing development. Is that right? Just like sort of separate, but separate or the same?
Right. Sometimes, well, a lot of the scholars, there's a lot of the advocates working in this field are saying, well, one size fit doesn't work.
Yeah.
So, so most of the times we focus on homelessness or low-cost housing. But then there are people who can afford, but they're not able to because they don't have the proper financial tools or the information. So the question is, should the city or the towns address these issues separately, or should they combine it in one?
Yeah, I mean, I think like I mean, yeah, it's an interesting dilemma, and I guess when you look at the kind of different housing that needs to be provided to different income levels and different needs, there's just a lot of different housing in each one of those buckets. I think like the overall message should be united around like there's a housing crisis which is due to lack of supply for many of the underserved communities that are living here. But yeah, I mean, I guess I would say from my experience and working in the workforce segment, the moment you start asking for subsidies, you sort of start treading in areas where, given the lack of enough public subsidy already, and I'm talking, I guess, about Los Angeles, California, the US as a context, given just the small amount of money out there already, and given the size of the kind of supply deficit, it's hard to argue that, some of that money should be directed away from, permanent supportive housing for people exiting homelessness, and towards the workforce housing segment, which is why we sort of focus so much on our essential housing campaign, for example, on this unsubsidized kind of component here, where like, the subsidy is great, but it's, in terms of like the size of the subsidy, even overall, just to be able to deploy for transitional housing or permanent supportive housing or public housing, it's so small compared to the amount of money that you need for, your entire capital stack to deploy that housing, that I think it's really kind of a crucial call to action to be like, yeah, focus on deploying your subsidy as efficient as possible, I think, in ending the most acute types of crises, which are, lack of services and housing for people on the very lowest end of the income continuum. But it's a call to the market. It's a lot of these can be market-based solutions where to really get to the housing in mass, it's not going to happen just by, public subsidy providing a few $1,000s per unit in sort of accelerated funds or whatever else. It's going to happen by structuring policy and incentivizing, the financing capital markets to act in a different way, which I think the city can take a critical role in that, because the cities control land use. So I think, I'm constantly disappointed by, like, for example, in California, just the lack of inclusionary zoning requirements in many cities. So, LA, like we provide lots of density bonuses, but we only ask for, 8 or 5% of the project to be affordable. And of that affordability, it's really only focused on sort of that 30 to 50, 60% AMI level. And there's zero incentive, which doesn't cost anything. It just changes the residual land value of the properties. And there's just a lack of like sort of inventive thinking out there that I think doesn't take a use of public subsidy. It's just sort of redirecting how we structure policy and finance.
Thank you. Jennifer, would you like to make comments?
Yes, thank you for the question. And it's a great question because it's something that I think about a lot. I've been in Ontario now just for a year. I haven't been long in this jurisdiction. And if people are familiar with Canada, each province and each jurisdiction has quite a different approach to housing. Prior to this, I was in British Columbia, and there they take a more inclusive approach and mix. They include housing for homelessness, housing for like low end of market, then near market and market. So they mix them all together. My only challenge there, and I don't know if where they're at now, it's been a couple of years since I was working there, is that they would have fixed certain percentages. And so that was, minimum 20% for, at the shelter rate for homeless, a minimum of 50% more of the moderate income, and then the balance of market housing. So that was my only challenge, is how do we get to these percentages? So I think it's really important that we look at them as a whole. from a delivery aspect, it's very challenging to do. It's much more difficult, but I think it does result in more inclusive, more complete communities. And we recognize that, you know, when they're no longer homeless or don't need those supports, why should they move to a different building? It creates housing stability. And I think we need to be mindful of that. I always look at housing as the 3 Ps, the properties. We have the people in need of housing, the properties, and then we layer the programs on top of that. So a property, say a 4-story, 100 units, it could have all different programs, all different operators in there. And so that's how I like to view housing and be inclusive. Thank you.
Jen?
Yeah, thank you. You know, thanks for that response, Jennifer. I think, you know, I totally am on the same page as you as in terms of, you know, the need for kind of like a diverse, inclusive, complete communities as kind of key to success for everyone. You know, we certainly see lots of examples. Most of the projects that we have funded have a variety of incomes in the same building, and certainly that is, I think, a best practice in terms of outcomes for individuals. Maybe just kind of like putting the hat of kind of energy efficiency, which is the lens of our funding, onto it. You know, I think when we're talking about energy efficient buildings, I don't know that there's different solutions necessarily depending on the type of housing that you'd be building, whether it be for those exiting homelessness, for low-income individuals or middle-class individuals. But I do think that there are certainly some different policy levers that may need to be considered. So for example, our funding is targeting basically anything on the non-market side of the housing spectrum. So we will fund municipal corp, nonprofit, and co-op housing specifically. And the reason that we designed our program that way was kind of acknowledging when you're talking about rents that are necessarily quite low, in order to actually like make the operations, like make the financials work on a project, our funding with a little bit of additional kind of grant incentive to allow for that energy efficiency is what can kind of make or break the project in incorporating the energy efficiency, which may be a little bit less of the case, for example, if you're building more on the private side, and that can be addressed a little bit more with debt. There's, you know, I think there's policy levers though as well that need to be explored, say for private market rental housing, where individuals are paying for their own utilities. Perhaps utilities are high, but those rents are affordable, and we don't want to lose kind of those affordable units that are in the private market through rent evictions, et cetera. So all this to say, I think we absolutely want inclusive, complete communities, but we maybe need to be thoughtful about what policy levers to pull depending on kind of the needs of the housing that's being developed.
Thank you. And I really acknowledge you brought a good point in your presentation, energy poverty. And I think that will be one of the points I will be including and making part of the resolution. I mean, all of you brought a lot of good points, but that was something I have not looked into, even though I have focused on circular economy. Jamie, would you like to add something?
Sure, I'll just be quick because I'm not an expert in municipal policy, but coming from the federal government aspect and the research that we do and talking about the Housing Accelerator Fund that's coming, yeah, we did a bunch of research there, and what I was reading on that, like when it comes to increasing the supply, it talks about diverse supply of housing. So there is not a one fits all. Someone mentioned that, and like we agree with that. There is not a one fits all. We do need diversity. And what municipalities really have to do, and we've been encouraging this for a long time, and we have guides to help, and that is create an action plan, a housing action plan. And you can only do that by doing a housing needs and demand study so that you know what your needs are, you know where your demand is going to come from. In Ontario, I believe their province requires you to do that every 10 years, to have a 10-year action plan on the books maybe, but taking a closer look at that, and the Accelerator Fund is going to do that. It's going to provide more funds to the municipality to get more help and get more information that they need in order to create a better plan and know, like someone mentioned, land use planning, like that's their biggest tool. Like if the future development of land has to be very well thought out and planned, and that's really in the privy of the municipality. So it sounds like we're all on the same page, and the research that I'm seeing at CMHC is supporting these needs as well.
Thank you. Second question. Actually, I would like to address one question to Jennifer Beasley. You brought in your presentation, you brought a good point, giving back to community by the developers. What do you mean by that? Do you mean community benefit agreement with developers, or is there another program? Jennifer, you're muted. So, Ozan, can you unmute Jennifer?
Do you get the message, Jennifer? You should be getting a message too.
I think you were sending it to me, not Jennifer.
Oh, Jennifer.
There, I got the message. In terms of when developers want to give back to the community, it can take different forms. It can be community benefit agreements, but those are more formal. Like those are agreements with the municipality, for planning approval purposes. So when you don't have the tools, the planning tools to require a developer to provide those benefits, you kind of have to appeal to their goodwill and, corporate social responsibility. And a community like ours, the Blue Mountains, they know they won't have anybody working in the grocery stores. They won't have, so if they're creating a development and bringing more people to live here, they need some services. And so the MOU that I was talking about that we're working with the developer, they're not mandated to. It does look good on their development approvals, but there is no formal agreement that dictates that. But it can take other forms. It can be a requirement from the municipality, but I wouldn't necessarily say that's a desire to give back. That's a requirement. So another approach from the Canmore perspective was that they kind of gave the developer different options of what they could provide and would score them. And what our role was to make it as easy as possible for the developer to provide the housing that we needed for the workforce. So I think I referenced that it was important to have a clear framework with, standardized rents and prices and things and how a program would work. So we make it easy for them. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. This has come up quite a bit in the last few months that I've been dealing with it. So what I just wanted to know how every country has its own approach to it. So thank you for the explanation. Let's move on to another question. This is related to post-COVID recovery. To combat rising inflation, central bank or federal banks are raising interest rate in attempt to curb rising inflation. Credit is becoming more expensive. Sales of loans offered by commercial banks are falling. How should anti-crisis housing support program or similar program should be structured that could significantly reduce the scale of the 2023 economic crisis? And that is related to housing. Should we start from the beginning? That will be Charlie. Charlie, are you still with us? Okay.
Yeah, I'm here. I don't know much about that act, so I guess I'll pass the mic to someone that can speak more eloquently about the inflation and everything else.
Well, you can, because you are into innovation, so the technology is there. And how can technology help you in gaining that capital or gaining that edge in the market?
About in terms of like construction costs, like the technology around construction.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, you know, unfortunately, the cheapest way to build is the most prevalent one, where you have, you know, multiple general contractors that know a skill and can bid on it, and that's sort of the same with materials and everything else. So the unfortunate part about things that are innovative in the construction space, I guess coming from like housing innovation and supporting all this innovation, 3D printing, everything else, I think that's the biggest gap right now, is like education of like all these different strategies to get more and more people using it. So, you know, whether it's 3D printing or some kind of panelized structure, or sort of a new way to convert shipping containers into housing, whatever. It's really the fact that you have 27 people, stakeholders, right? Whether they're building and safety or fire department or the neighbors or a neighborhood organization. They all sort of need it to understand any of this new technology or building methods in order for it to move forward. And so you're really only moving as fast as your weakest link. So yeah, I think it goes back to like that sort of just how to streamline education, whether it's the workers or, you know, people working at the city, on understanding the ins and outs of all this stuff. Because like at the pace we're currently in taking education, I think it's I don't think it's realistic for a lot of these new promising technologies or building methods to really make an impact at scale and driving down the cost, because the barriers for them to just overcome to enter the market is so high. So, you know, I think the technology is great on one piece, but it has to be paired with a mass educational campaign, and actually in order to get enough people to know about it and know how to quote on it.
See, you have the answer. Jennifer, would you like to take the, I can extract answers.
I'll comment briefly, because we're obviously facing this right now. As I mentioned,
Right.
we're in the pre-construction phase with our project, and you know, we are, you know, looking for design efficiencies and technology to, you know, but it's that the pressure both of the increase of construction costs plus the increase in interest rates, and so we are looking at other funding sources. We are also looking to CMHC, and sorry, Jane, but and how they may assist, because the interest rate increase to qualify for, you know, the qualifying rate is really making it challenging. We have a bigger gap that we need to fill. We're looking to the province for that. So I would look to some of the presenters that are engaged in that field for some suggestions.
Let's see what Jen has to share with us.
Yeah, no, I would just kind of reiterate that I think it is quite challenging. We're facing this with a number of projects that have come to us for funding. So, you know, we're having internal conversations about what we can do within the constraints that we are working in as a funder, with a funding agreement as well that we have to work within, to see what flexibilities we can have and how we can be as enabling as possible. But, you know, kind of acknowledging that it is tough. It is tough for these projects that, again, are really working when you're talking about non-market housing, like mixed income non-market housing, that are really kind of working on the margins and have really tight operating budgets. And so rising interest rates and rising cost of construction are really impacting the financial feasibility. We're working with other funders too, so maybe I'll additionally pass the buck over to Jamie as a bigger funder to see kind of where they're at as well on this one, because it's a tough one. It's a really tough one.
Jamie, the buck has been passed to you. One more.
I knew this would end up back on me. I mean, I don't have any magic for you. I can tell you that we are having meetings. Our budgets are but you've probably heard maybe the rumors, but our budgets are being tested, stretched. We're going to have a hard time meeting our targets now. Like, this is affecting us too. So we are looking at it. So, I mean, we're looking also at other initiatives that we're going to announce. I think the housing supply challenge, the problem is we can't fix this like overnight. We're working on fixing it. It takes time, but cutting the red tape, like there was a study done by CMHC a while ago on the cost of housing, and a large portion of it, I can't remember the number, that was on development cost of getting land developed and sitting for so long, and the cost of that being passed on to the occupant, to the person that ends it, was fairly high. So, I mean, I know it's a Hail Mary, and it's not necessarily the best answer for you, but I think the Housing Accelerator Fund to help municipalities do faster approvals will alleviate maybe some of the costs that we're looking at, because there's only so much we can do, and it's like a perfect storm. We got hit with interest rates and the supply chain and inflation all hitting us at the same time. In any other environment, just one of those would be upsetting enough, but to have them all come. So yeah, we are looking. We do have some initiatives that we're looking to fix some of the problems that we know that maybe can be fixed with like I was telling you, with the development. And we're also encouraging a lot more, like the way we're trying to handle it on the ground. I'm in project development. I'm dealing with people. We're encouraging more partnerships. We're encouraging more investment, maybe being creative with that, finding people that want to, that maybe have, a social conscious that could get involved, community housing foundations that, sometimes have money to go towards this stuff. So just looking more, bringing in more partners, creating a stronger team to try to fill those gaps. But as far as maybe waiting for the federal government to dump more money into the budgets, I'm sure that offers out we're asking, but is it realistic? I don't know. Like, I just don't know if the government's going to have an appetite to keep spending and spending. We have to look at other solutions too, and I've mentioned a couple of them.
Right. And just so you know, there is no right or wrong answer or a perfect answer, because we are coming out of a pandemic, and everyone is given us a chance to reset everything and rethink, relook at everything, and reprogram, and everything is being discussed. So, and I'm glad we are having this conversation. You mentioned, I spent some time in Brazil, and I worked with the participatory theory, where the community decides what they want. And about 3 weeks ago, we had a U.S. mayoral roundtable where the LA mayor brought up this participatory budget. That means that the public gets to vote on what they want based on the budget. Now, all of you are kind of working in the public municipality, the funds and the social funds and the NGO work and grants. Do you think the approach of participatory theory, where the public gets to vote, or the participatory budget, do you think that is one of the answers to expedite in our post-COVID recovery in the housing sector? You had to call names, or will you just raise your hands? Jen is raising her hand.
Maybe I can just comment on from my time working at the city of Calgary. I think it's a really interesting and tricky question, just to say that housing consistently would come up as a top priority, and affordable housing specifically would come as a top priority when the city would do kind of engagement with the public on, like, what are they looking for from the municipality? Like, where should we be prioritizing our services and all that kind of stuff. Affordable housing was always within the top 1 or 2 issues. But the NIMBYism is real too. So when it comes to actually kind of working on a specific development in a specific neighborhood, that was also a kind of a challenge that we faced as municipal staff in terms of kind of like doing that engagement with the community, and getting folks on board. So I think actually participatory budgeting might be good, because I think you might be like lean in on that first part where I think actually everyone more or less agrees that we need more affordable housing. So there might be actually more municipal kind of budget tied to that. I also recognize though the municipal role in affordable housing, I think Jennifer mentioned this earlier too, is kind of different across the country depending on the provincial territorial context, but also on the like municipal context specifically as well. And you know, the general public may or may not understand what levers the municipality is actually able to pull versus not. So I think it would be a really interesting exercise, and it could perhaps kind of push municipalities to be a little bit creative then on the housing solutions that they may be able to find if it is a consistent prioritized theme, maybe.
Go ahead, Jennifer. Goes on, she has to mute herself.
Okay, well, I really appreciate your thoughts, Jen. I agree with them. I think it would be a very interesting exercise, participatory budgeting. You know, affordable attainable housing's top priority in many communities, but then when it comes to allocating funds to it, often they back down, whether it's NIMBYism or they believe that that's not their role, that the municipal role or taxpayer dollar. And I think I listed it as a challenge of perception that that the workforce housing is a cost. It's not an investment in the community. It's just a cost. There goes the money, rather than recognizing as it is an asset for your community, for your future, for your growth. So it would be interesting. I'd like to see an exercise like that.
You mean you would like to have a community meeting and actually see the action and see what the outcome will be?
Well, I'd like to see, because in terms of when we go to the public and the NIMBYism, you know, there may be a few strong voices, but there's a lot of quiet voices that are in support. And I think one thing that we also have to remember is when we're engaging, you know, on housing, we're also providing housing for people who aren't yet residents, and they don't have a say either, especially workforce housing, because a lot of workforce housing, the communities that I've worked in, primarily appeal to newcomers to the community first because they don't have those connections. So it would be an interesting exercise.
Jen, you raised your hand. You have to unmute it.
Got it. Yeah, and just what Jennifer said made me think, oh yeah, just to add to my answer too, you know, the point around municipalities and the taxes that they're able to actually like draw from is municipalities really do have very limited fiscal tools. And I think it is like a very fair kind of argument for municipalities that property taxes aren't necessarily the right solution for some of this. So there is like a provincial, federal government component to it too when it comes to the municipal role in housing and how much they're able to address.
Charlie, you have a comment? Jamie, go ahead. Charlie, you unmute yourself.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, I wasn't raising my hand. I saw Thomas there, but I guess my one quick comment is I'm always wary of bringing more people into the process. It slows everything down. So as an example, we just did we were working on a simple workflow of like, what are the steps from I have a space in my backyard to getting a backyard built in your backyard, just to sort of go through the workflow of how many different action items does that single family homeowner have to take in order to complete that, from getting the permits, picking the GC, the architect, all those different action steps, all those different touch points of the city. Step one was demoing a garage, a detached garage, just to create the building pad for a backyard home. That step alone in the city of Los Angeles currently takes 85 days. You have to do 86 action items. There's 140 pages of forms. It's 14 different times you're filling out forms. You pay fees for the demo permit itself 3 different times. At no point during that process do you have an idea of how much anything's going to cost. And you touch about 15 city employees. So just to get a piece of paper with the picture of the site plan and what you're demoing to start the step again of like just starting the permitting process for the backyard home, it's 15 employees. It's, God knows how many other people are involved in that whole process. And I think that's part of the problem, is that the red tape is now just become, it's everyone has a say. It seems like even just in demoing a backyard garage in your own property, 100 people should not have a say in that, because it ends up taking 100 days. So every person you add to the mix is a detriment to accelerating and lowering the cost. So benevolent dictatorship, I think, is probably a more appropriate reaction to something that is a clear crisis.
Got it. Jamie, would you like to add something?
Well, not much. I agree with everything that's being said, and the comments Charlie's making hear about that all the time, and hopefully that's what our Housing Accelerator Fund is going to help with the municipalities. And the stuff that I'm reading, like doing some pre-zoning and just eliminating the steps and making sense of what you need to build and how someone can, if someone's ready to go and they're going to build what's in the plan, like you do an action plan, if it fits the plan, you have your pre-zoning done, you get immediate approval and you go like that. That's the kind of things that the Housing Accelerator Plan is going to be looking at with the municipalities on how they can get there, how they can get to that place where they can approve projects quickly and approve the right projects too. Like, and yeah, the NIMBY, I did have a comment on the NIMBY too. I'm sure everyone knows, but there are groups called Yes in My Backyard too. I've worked with a couple of them. One year, Kitchener-Waterloo has a bad NIMBY problem. They came to us a couple of years ago, and I ended up talking to the problem is the NIMBY people are very well organized, and they seem to have a lot of time and patience to put into preventing development, where the people that are they want the development are more quiet and not as organized. So those people are out there in your community. You need to organize them, find them, educate them, and give them a voice as well, is my best advice on that. And anyone interested, we do have a research report on NIMBY. It was published a few years ago, but there's some takeaways in that report on how to try to combat NIMBYism. If anyone's interested in that report, I'll send it to them.
Yeah, do share if you have it electronically. Share it here.
It's a PDF. Yep.
Okay. It's a PDF. Send it to me, and then I can share it with whomever would like.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah. Next question is related to circular economy. That is energy efficiency and saving water and managing construction waste. It is a hot topic, but not much of an awareness is out there, and there's not much policies and procedures out there. So for the public housing, for the low-cost housing, when you work on these programs, do you have any matrix? Do you have any criteria that they should meet certain standards of maybe LEED or Energy Star or recycled products? So the question for Jennifer, and Jamie is from the public housing, municipality, and NGO work. And for Charlie, it's innovation and technology, because that's where you are at. And when you answer, tell me how you use technology and innovations into circular economy. So the one question for 3 people, and the same question is for Charlie. So Charlie, let's go, your turn.
Oh, all right. Well, I mean, I guess I absolutely believe in the circular economy, but I do think, like, at the end of the day, that projects don't get built unless it pencils. Like, the money going into it and the rent income net of expenses coming out of it makes sense. But yeah, I do think actually, we're releasing later this week, this is part of our platform, we release a new episode, 15 minutes long, highlighting innovation kind of around the housing industry. Every 2 weeks, we release this episode. So the episode actually that we're releasing this week is with Africa's largest institutional real estate developer, Acorn Holdings, which launched Kenya's first green bond financing program back in 2019, and then followed up with some innovative REITs. But I thought what was interesting about that green bond financing that they explored was you have this institutional source of capital out there that has been sort of adds this certification requirement to have, IFC Edge in this case was the certification for the buildings, but it adds like a new channel of funding into a market to incentivize development with the added clause of being meeting, certain sustainability requirements. In this case, I think it's like 20% reduction in its carbon footprint of development versus traditional construction, 20% savings in operations, and 20% savings in something else. But really, I kind of think new sources of capital out there can self-regulate, saying, look, like, we're going to provide this bond financing or whatever, but with it, we might be reducing either the debt service coverage ratio or the pricing, or increasing, the leverage that we would provide on there. But with that, we expect, this sort of green component there to kind of cover some of the, I guess, larger upfront costs for, the savings you kind of net over time. So I think, it's beyond just like the technology out there. I think the banking industry and just the private equity providers can add just a clause out there of showing what type of other ESG, especially environmental impacts that are happening there, just to kind of incentivize even just the exploration of more green technology. So I think that's the kind of the first step, is getting the money to be more green. I don't know.
No, I think that's right. And it's a new area, and it is booming, and more research and more incentives and more capital needs to be allocated for this part. So, and now Jen, would you like to go next?
Yeah, sure. Happy to go next. Yeah, I really like this question. It's funny. It's something that's been coming up more and more recently, as you said, for us. So our program is primarily focused on energy efficiency. With the time constraints, I didn't get into our kind of eligibility requirements, but we have one that's specifically energy efficiency focused. The reason that that's our primary environmental kind of outcome focus is because of its tie to affordability for this program specifically. But I would say kind of the GHG emission reductions is also kind of a core environmental benefit that we're looking for with our program. Then we have a bunch of secondary environmental benefits that we ask applicants to speak to, and this kind of like managing construction waste, water, et cetera, like more kind of circular economy type of thinking would be part of those secondary environmental benefits that we'd be looking at in kind of a wholesome evaluation of a project. We also, in terms of building kind of like business cases for some of this stuff, or like testing projects, we have a pilot component to our offer that I didn't, again, with managing time, didn't speak to directly, but it's a $500,000 grant, and it's really intended to test solutions with the intent of replication and scaling, be that either for a provider themselves to say, hey, I'm going to try this on like 1 unit or 2 units, and then we're going to potentially do this with our portfolio going forward, or I'm going to test this and share this with the sector so it can be done more broadly, hopefully, or maybe both. But this comes to mind because I was just reading one of our pilot applications recently that's going for approval shortly, that really has this kind of managing kind of construction waste, but not only construction waste, all of the materials that are part of the development, and thinking like about the full life cycle of the building and kind of carbon impacts and the circular component to it, right from construction through to the building's natural end. So I'm really excited about that pilot and what we may be able to share in terms of, learnings as that project is constructed and going forward. So I think this is an area where there's a lot more opportunity for that kind of capacity development in particular. So yeah, thanks for raising this one.
Who would like to go next? Jamie,
I'll just add a little bit. I think I agree 100% with what Jen said. And I've been with CMHC a long time. The past CMHC was going down this road with our equilibrium housing and our equilibrium communities, where we were getting to net zero housing. And what I will tell you about, our programs that I was offering, you did notice energy efficiency is one of our social outcomes, but I agree with what Jen was saying. It's a lot more than that too. It's the zero waste. And we had teams that were doing that, building a house, building an entire house with almost zero waste. And it's all about the design and, thinking about the design from the start. So, but the point I wanted to make is you saw some thresholds there, but one thing I will give our team credit for was they instead of just meeting the criteria and qualifying, they score the projects, and you can earn priority points by going above the minimum thresholds. And of course, with energy efficiency, to get maximum points, you can go to net zero ready. And we have funded affordable housing in Ontario that has been net zero ready. Like to the teams that are building that, they're building it affordable. The technology's there, the skills there for certain companies that know how to do it correctly. And I think it's wonderful. And that's one of the nice things is instead of CMHC trying to determine what we feel is appropriate by going to the industry and saying, you tell us what the best you can build and we'll fund the best. And that's how we got these good projects that we did get in the past. And we look forward to getting more.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts. Jennifer, I know you have something to add.
Thank you. Well, I'll just add a little bit from the nonprofit perspective. I would say that, as I mentioned, we're still in the early stages of some of our project and program work. So we look to leadership at the municipal level within the municipality, and they're making great efforts and very interested. And we have very engaged citizens, Climate Action Now Network, who really set a high bar for us to meet the community expectations. And then we also look to the funders. We did get some funding through the study grant program, the FCM grant study, to look at how net zero could be achieved and things like that. So we also look at leadership from the funding organizations as well.
Brilliant. We have 2 minutes. And before Ilda tells me my time is up. Oh, Thomas, you have your hand up? Would you like to say something, Thomas?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, thank you. A great seminar. Just a couple of points. First of all, I've been put a roadmap together for attainable housing, which I've been working on for a number of months, and I've completed it and sent it out to a number of people here in our local community in Collingwood. A couple of things. Charlie, you mentioned about garden suites. If you go to victoria.ca, which obviously is part of the province of BC, they have actually created a very unique document to make garden suites very, very simple. And everybody can learn from that document. A couple of things in regard to financing. One of the things that I've made a recommendation in my report and is taking having the municipality the ability to tax a homeowner on the seller side and the buyer side. So if you put a 1% tax in there as an example, you know, you could raise funds in your local community for attainable housing. So it isn't necessarily a tax, but it is a tax. But you know, it's not coming from the whole community. It's coming from somebody that's profiting by living in the community. So it's something to take a look at. The other thing is that I was talking with, I'm going to mention it. First of all, there should be more financial people on these seminars, because I had a very long chat with the people who are running the real estate division of the Bank of Montreal here in Canada. I would be interested in people putting up their hands if they know that the Bank of Montreal has set aside $12 billion over the next 10 years for attainable housing. There's one man number here, and Jamie put up his hand. And I can tell you, like I shook my head and I said, $12 billion over the next 10 years, not as good at rates, of course, as Jamie came up with the CAC, et cetera. But I mean, here you have, you know, the private sector out there with, you know, a massive amount of money that they're going to dedicate, you know, to attainable housing. Now, let's just say that I don't think that they're going to be as creative as a lot of people that are out there offering funding, and they're going to have to be more creative, but the other banks have to be looking at this also. So these are the types of people that should be on these seminars to understand what they can do with attainable housing. Anyway, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Jamie, you had your hand up, so go ahead.
No, I put my
I'm not able to unmute you for some reason.
No, there. I put my hand up because Vincent said, "Put your hand up if you know that the bank has committed $12 billion." We were in on that deal with the bank. What I was going to tell Thomas is, I don't know if we still know exactly how, like what the program looks like. They've committed the money, but when we were kind of asking for more details about it, I mean, I'm not on that team, but last I knew, we haven't heard exactly how they're going to contribute the money to affordable housing, but just that they have made that announcement. It's one of those things where you make the announcement and then figure out how you're going to do it. But the biggest thing is get the announcement out there. And there's a couple other banks that have made similar announcements, and we're expecting more from the big five for sure. Like 100%, Thomas, you're right on.
Thank you. My last question was, are we prepared to deal with population growth in towns and cities? After COVID, I mean, during COVID, people shifted from mega cities, big cities, to small and medium-sized cities. Knowing what I've heard today from all of you, I don't think I need to ask that question. I think we are prepared. And I've had the best conversation. I've enjoyed this session, and look for my email. I'll be contacting you with more one-on-one. So thank you for your time, and truly enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you very much, Shally.